There was like people on top of people. There was a pregnant lady underneath me shouting, "I'm pregnant." There was a little boy in his red and black uniform from around here. He must have been 8 years old, little tiny thing, his face smashed into the steps. So we were looking around, but you kind of have this glazed sense of, I must not panic.
Emma Stevie, you were there this morning. Tell me what happened. What did you see?
I got on the train, and within 5 seconds, the doors were closing, and we just heard the loudest, scariest screams coming from what sounded like the carriage right next to us, and loud men shouting, "Run!" So when people shout, "Run!" you run, and we just all ran for our lives, and we didn't know why. We didn't hear an explosion, and we got to the steps, and it was just the worst. It was like a proper human crush that we all got stuck in, and there was women underneath me. There's a lady saying, "I'm pregnant." There's a little boy, his face had got smacked into the step. There was just layers and layers of people screaming. It was awful. It was just really traumatic, and we didn't know why we were running, and I just thought maybe this is worse, maybe this is all a big mistake. I just feel so lucky not that I wasn't the woman, two women underneath me.
So you were literally, for anybody who doesn't know this station, it is a very small station. There is one staircase that comes from the platform down. There are two small exits.
So you think hundreds and hundreds of people came off that train into a tiny station to go down a tiny set of steps, and it was just a complete crush. You know, it was.
And you were literally trampling on people underfoot.
Literally trampling. There was layers of people underneath me, and the tube men, the guys that work for the underground, all two of them, which starts to make me realise we should have more people. But I just thought for a second, it goes through my mind, I'm going to die today. But I was looking at the women underneath me thinking, you poor thing. I was wondering, someone broken a leg in here.
And you couldn't get down, nobody could get down to help them? There were that many people?
No, it was like Hillsborough kind of stacked. People just all on top of each other, because if you've got hundreds and hundreds of people running down a tiny staircase, you're just going to have lots of layers of bodies and people. And there's this poor little boy in his red and black uniform. I think he goes to one of the schools around here, and he'd smashed his face and he was screaming and crying, and by the time we all could come out, he was being carried by someone and still crying, and I was thinking, has he broken his leg? It was just really, no one knew as well. We were still coming out. I walked around and said, are you okay to a few people? And everyone was just very shaken, and we didn't know what had happened. We just knew that we ran away because we were told to run away, and then there was this big crush.
It's peak commuter time, isn't it? And when you were on the train though, so you didn't see the flames, you heard the bang though?
No, we didn't. No one heard an explosion. We just heard what sounded like the carriage next to us all screaming. Big, like that blood-curdling scream of just seeing something horrible happen, and we all were told to run, so we got off and ran. This was as the doors were closing, so we were trying to get out, the doors opened, and we just ran.
And there have been multiple injuries. We have one of the witnesses here, Emma, one of the survivors who is willing to speak to us today, and she will be recounting the chain of events that led to the 6th terrorist attack this year in Britain. So Emma, would you just tell us a bit more about what happened? What exactly did you see this morning?
Well, I got on the train at Parsons Green, where I go every morning on my way to work at Delamar Academy, Ealing Studios. Hello. And I just heard screams as I got on the train, lots of screams. I got off the train and men were shouting, "Run," and lots of women were screaming. And then it just was a big pile-up on the stairs, and a lot of people were injured.
Were the people injured by the explosion, or was it because there have been reports of a stampede as well?
The stampede was what I got caught up in, but I'm okay. Lots of people were really injured in the stampede, but the explosion, I only saw victims of the explosion on my way out of the station when we could all get out and it was all cleared. Yeah.
Okay. And what was the atmosphere like? Were people
shock, just pure shock. Nobody knew what had happened, and we were.
Did you hear the blast?
No one. I don't think any. Unless you were in the carriage, you wouldn't have heard it because, just screams, running.
And obviously, it does coincide with the same period that schools are reopening. So
There were lots of school children in their uniforms, and that was really heartbreaking to see some of them hurt. Hello. I've just seen my friend. I've got to go.
Okay. Hi. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for talking to us.
I just remember the screams of people being crushed against. Sorry. It's my wife. I better. Hello.
Luke Walmsley's hand shakes as he takes the call.
All right, love you lots. Bye. Chaos. It was it was every man for itself to get down the stairs, and it's a very tight exit, as you said. So yeah, people were just pushing, and then that's when I kind of saw a couple of injured people, went back, asked if they were okay. Other people attended them. Then there were like nannies or mums asking where their children were. Screams just got louder and louder, and as people ran past other people, their screams got louder, and it was like a crescendo of noise all the way down the carriage and then down the platform. It was chaos. It was it was every man for itself to get down the stairs, and it's a very tight exit, as you said. So yeah, people were just pushing, and then that's when I kind of saw a couple of injured people, went back, asked if they were okay. Other people attended them. Then there were like nannies or mums asking where their children were, and that's when it became apparent. It was like the whole rush had just taken everyone down there. You could just, down the tube, you could just see like luggage and bags and stuff left around.
And the first thing I thought was there'd be maybe a second bomb or an attacker with a gun, and I just thought that's us gone, to be honest. And we just legged it down the thing, hoping that the attacker, I know there isn't one, but in that time you don't know that there was going to be someone following you down the track with a gun.
Pulling into the station, I just suddenly saw lots of people running towards me, in panic mode. I knew that something serious had happened. So I stood up, the doors were opening because we were coming into the station. We just arrived, and I dived out myself, but not knowing what I was running away from. I didn't see anybody seriously. You would imagine that those people were further behind, but I did see people burnt, people's hair singed, clothes covered in something that looked like white cotton or a white foam or something. So maybe something exploded, but they seemed to be covered in lots of debris, possibly from that. I couldn't see or hear anything. I just saw from my peripheral vision people just panicking and running and screaming and shouting, and I knew that something had taken place. The doors were just starting to open at the station, so I ran like everybody else did. People actually falling in front of me, I stumbled also, managed to get myself up, because my concern was to not be on the floor, because there was a stampede behind me as well.
Allison Burry, defense specialist, riding in a nearby train rather, at the time of that attack.
Well, as a terrorism expert, you don't really expect to be in a major terrorism incident, Bill. It was something to be seen for sure. The train stopped, the doors opened, we all left as quickly as we could, and then it became very quickly clear that there was a serious incident. You could tell police immediately started arriving on the scene. They literally arrived instantaneously. Were encouraging us to leave. What I did see was a lot of small children. There was a small boy who it looked like he'd been crushed, Bill. So I saw a lot of children who were attended, but very frightening to be an adult, let alone a child in a situation like that.
You're painting quite an image for us.
Here with two people who were on the train this morning. Martin Adam is with me right here, and Sally Falding. And Martin, you were actually on the carriage where the explosion took place?
That's correct, yeah. It took place about 10 meters behind me. I was stood by the door, the glass partition behind me. Heard a loud bang, and then as I looked to my right, there was the flame, a fireball sort of came through the carriage.
Through the whole carriage?
Not the whole carriage, it came about level to where I was. But as the doors opened, people then began leaving the train straight away. I could imagine. Martin, you're actually a security expert. How would you assess how people handled the situation? Generally, I thought people dealt with it quite well. They exited the train very, very quickly onto the platform and then moved away from the actual carriage. I went back to look in the carriage to see if there were any casualties, but there was nobody left in the train.
It's hard to explain because it happens in an instant and you run. There were people in it, of course. This fireball is just going over your head and everybody's screaming, and you just run out of the tube as quick as you can.
I just saw quite a lot of fire coming towards us. You really felt the heat of it. It's one of your worst fears to see an explosion in a tube train.
Are you okay?
I'm very shaken up, and yeah, it's horrible to think how much worse it could have been. And after it happened, I immediately thought, goodness, that could have been so much worse.
And then I suddenly heard a big bang in my left-hand side. So I turned my head and I saw the big fireballs surge to my side. And that time I realized why people are screaming and crying. And I get up immediately towards the door, and the door was open. Yeah, that's very good. So people in front of me, because panic, people in front of me were shaking and then fell over, and I was pushing, and I fell over as well. And people on top of me. It's quite a mess, panics. The first thing I remember is the sound, explosion sound, and I was literally sit next to the explosion carriage, and I turned my head left, and I saw the fire emerge towards my side. So I literally just stand up, and meanwhile the lady was screaming, crying. So I get out, but unfortunately people in front of me fell over, so I tracked as well, and people on top of me. So when I get out, it's very difficult to stand it up. I didn't see that. It was after we came out from the carriage, and the gentleman sat beside me on the bench, and he got really burned badly. That's what I see.
So I heard screams, and I was looking up to try and work out where they were coming from. Looked up to the track, the train wasn't moving, and it looked like people were still getting on, and then it looked like people were trying to get off. And then a lady ran into, I live in a close, she ran into the close, started to ask for somewhere safe to go. So she'd lost her shoes, she hadn't heard a noise, she'd just seen lots of children and lots of people trying to get off the train. It was a packed platform anyway, so we were in my flat, and then shortly after we were told, the police came through and told us all to evacuate, so we had to get out quite quickly. Workmen around had said that there'd been reports of other devices on the train, so they were obviously looking on the tracks.
Did you see people who'd been injured or not?
I didn't see anyone who'd been injured. There were a lot of people running around sort of saying they'd heard noises and emergency services were there. Some people were saying they'd heard a shot. None of my neighbours that I've spoken to this morning had even heard an explosion, but we could smell something.
As I approached the station, everyone was piling out. People weren't even running; they were falling over each other and just fleeing, I guess. Well, we were told that there was an explosion on the district line, and then that there was someone running around with a knife. And we've just found out, I guess, half an hour later, that there's a second explosive device somewhere. I don't know. Very frightening, I guess, and a bit confusing. I don't think anyone really knows what's going on exactly.